Room Publishing. Is she the only? I know besides your books. What are you looking to add more into it?
So, really great this year. Very excited. Kind of ambitious once again, but we'll see how the year plays out. But we're looking at a couple of new titles. One thing I'm working on right now is I'm in the midst of editing and formatting a book from my first ghostwriting client. Okay. A gentleman named Ronnie Smith back in Chicago. Basically, he wanted to do his memoir. Okay. And so I'm about maybe a fourth the way through it right now. I've read bits and pieces over the time, but we've been expanding it. But basically, it's the tale of a gentleman that's about in his 60s. Okay. And he's talking about, moving around a lot in Chicago over the years and how things have changed, his personal experiences and things of that nature. It's going to make for a great book. But the thing is that it's the ultimate fulfillment of that second half of my dream of publishing someone else. So we anticipate being done and the book being out by about the summer. Around about that time, we're also looking for the third book in the series, Jayla Johns, which will be Antics in Arizona. So far, she's gone to Alabama. We see, Rosa Parks. We see the Tuskegee Airmen. We see the George Pettis Bridge. We see Bloody Sunday. They've gone from there to Alaska, and we've seen how the segregated black men of the Army Corps were helping to bridge the gap between Alaska and the lower 48 states. Okay. But the book that we're going to do together, the first one is Arizona Antics, and that will be out in the summer. So that would give me my first children's literature book. We'll have our first memoir. Also in the works is a science fiction graphic novel. Basically, like I said, I've been writing for a while. And back in my early teens, I was doing a lot of little short stories. And at one point, I decided to challenge myself to write something longer. And it turned into about 100-page sci-fi, futuristic story, heroes saving the galaxy sort of thing. And over the years, I decided that, this would be better as a comic book. Yeah. And then I thought, well, it's that many pages. A comic book is a graphic novel, just, very thick. And, we don't even have those no more. Don't nobody read comic books anymore. Well, I do. Well, it's not like, you can go to the store now these days, like we used to when we were kids and just go pick up one. Well, you do unless you have like a hunt them out. Yeah, going to like the vintage stores. Because I'm a real big avid reader, so like I read anything from the newspaper all the way up to self-help books, So when you said science fiction, it kind of like, ding, I was like, oh, okay, good. But, and it speaks to the whole thing with this industry and even, how I got to the point that I was publishing my own works, that I am publishing my own works and trying to help other people publish theirs. If you can imagine that bookstores and books in general, when you're thinking about books, you're probably thinking about other stuff like self-help and it's the main product in these big stores, which have been closing. And comic books are a very narrow market in comparison, right? And so if those bigger stores are closing, imagine what's happening to the comic book stores. And so, I was fortunate enough that, everywhere I lived, Chicago, at one point in Missouri for college, in Florida for a minute, here in Texas, that I've always found, comic book stores, but because it was something I was intentionally seeking out, right? And so, all those things, even my mom kind of came at me with this after the Black Panther, and, black folks, really was looking at sci-fi real hard, right? And it was like, you need to go back to doing this. Actually, I've had so many of my friends who absolutely love what I've been doing with this, what's been labeled the Love series, but a couple of them remember the writings of my youth, and they were like, you have to do something with this story. So most of last year, I was pretty low-key. One of the main things I was doing was editing that story, because keep in mind, this is something I wrote when I was about 12 or 13, and so with all of that refinement of grammar rules and wanting to tell a better story, I had to go back and look at it. But it was also even tricky too that I still wanted to keep that youthful imagination, that that whole spirit. But in the course of doing that, I got to looking at it and comparing to, I'm a big Marvel comic book fan. Looking at, some of those books, I could clearly see now a template to take what I have in writing and, move it over into
the direction.
So I've basically been in communications with a number of different illustrators, because that's really the biggest thing about it, to be quite honest, is finding a great illustrator and, obviously a great budget, because it's a considerable amount of work, and having someone draw those different panels, and, and I can come behind that and add the speech bubbles and everything. But it's something that I'm really, really looking forward to finally having out, because it's something that's, just kind of been there for years, and for now it to be, something that I can physically touch, hold, and everything, that's going to be amazing. So you can kind of look for bits and pieces of that to be previewed over the year, as well as the idea now more recently has been to, do it as a traditional comic book, in the sense of not releasing the graphic novel all at once, but releasing, a month at a time, something to that effect, the 20-some-odd, 30-some-odd page comic book, and later on binding it all together. So that will add science fiction in terms of the new genres. In addition to that, there are a couple of different writing coach clients that I and some other associates are working with that will turn into other memoir and things of that nature. So I'm looking at the possibility of about 5 to 7 different new books by the end of the year, bringing about 4 or 5 new genres. So fiction, poetry, memoir, even reference materials and things of that nature.
So I was reading something one day, and it said, because we kind of, some people, well, I ain't going to even say some people, like all of us, sometimes we are walking into our purpose and we see something that, that we really want to do, but sometimes it may not be for us, you know what I mean? And sometimes we kind of confuse guys, and then, we kind of use flesh and then try to go after it, and sometimes it never works because we don't, walk into his will. So being that you started writing when you were almost 12 years old, did you always know that you were going to be a writer, or was it something that you were seeking, besides that?
So at its core, at the beginning, it was totally one of those things that you would call a hobby, right? It was reading a lot of comics. It was watching a lot of cartoons. It was reading Bible stories. It was reading the Childcraft encyclopedias, for anybody old enough to remember those. The
tan books with the green.
I know mine were white. And it was about maybe 20 books, but there were only 3 that I kept going back to. I kept going back to the short stories, the fairy tales, and I think the mythology. And I think it was a thing of, I liked the story but didn't want it to end, or I liked the story but I didn't like parts of it, so I found myself modeling those stories, taking those literal characters and just changing the story. And then, you get into school and you see that's all that they're really teaching. I teach creative writing, and that's what I teach students to, here's something that you should read, get an idea of how it's made up, and then duplicate it. And so it wasn't a thing of wanting to be a writer professionally back then, but another cool thing is that recently I've been looking at those older childhood drawings and writings, and I saw that somewhere in there I was making book covers. Now, mind you, all this is college rule paper, right? With the 3 holes or your 3-ring binder. And I would draw on the front, and that would be the front cover, and then on the back there, towards the end of like that time period, I noticed that I even started making little imprints, like logos. And I told this story recently at a storytelling event, but I would take those and largely, the little green twist ties you have for your bread or your garbage bags, I would take those, fill those in the holes, and that was how I found the book. So I guess for the longest, when I look back on it now, being 41 now, and this is something I was doing like when I was maybe 9, I kind of always saw what it was supposed to look like. But the idea of it
just not the
being,
full picture just yet.
Well, the idea of it being something professional, that was much later. It was, I remember even being in high school reading some things. No knocks to anybody in the American literary canon and all of that. But I remember reading a couple of things and being like, I could have wrote this.
Right.
And getting into college, I was seeing that whole time from my family, my friends, my teachers, test scores, that writing is like your thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, we grow up in America. Let's just call it what it is. And it's capitalistic.
Right.
It's driven. It's money driven. And so much like anybody else that goes to college, anybody that goes to school, the whole goal is you go to school, you get the degree, you get the job, you get the house, you get the family, you get the kids, you go on vacation on occasion, you retire or something. And looking at that goal, which largely I would say was fostered upon me, I would look at writing as something that couldn't fulfill all of this. And over time, life changes, love changes, circumstances. I saw, if done right, if done slowly, carefully, intentionally, this could be the thing that still gets you those things. And so it was, I would have to say, honestly, around the time that I was writing the first book that turned into my thesis, where I ever considered writing professionally.
Right.
That's really, really when it began,
And I know that, and I would because from experience, us in the arts, it's a little bit more, to me, it's like a little bit more of a longer process. Because we're not as much, I would say, cliche, like appreciated, especially like you said, if you're going from high school, college, get a law degree or whatever the case may be, you got your family with the picket fence and all this kind of stuff. We have our breaks, you know what I mean? It's not like we can just say, because me personally, I thought singing was just gonna be my thing. Like I was like, okay, God, all right, that's what I'm gonna do because I can sing or whatever.
Right.
And then this opened up. And then I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to just sing. I want to be on the stage and sing. And then, but he worked it out to where I could incorporate all of it at the same time.
Yes.
But it was a process where to the point where I was like, I give up on this. I don't want to do this because it takes so much work. Then, you get to the point where you're like, ain't nobody going to believe in me. Ain't nobody going to, all of that. So what would you tell, because I know like some younger authors that are trying to get out. Like one of my cousins, I didn't even know that he was sitting on a children's book. I didn't even know at all.
Okay.
He has a daycare or whatever, that's down the street. But